Hey everybody, this is Jon Croft from Cultural Warfare with Jon Croft, and I am Jon Croft. How's everybody doing tonight? We got Rebecca Croft here.
Hi, Jon Croft. How are you?
Doing well, doing well.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah, it hasn't quite warmed up yet in Florida yet, but it's getting close. You can feel it.
Yeah, spring is in the air.
Yeah, it's basically just summer in Florida. Just bam, humidity. Yeah, so it's been a pretty hectic week, but fun, still fun.
It has been a hectic week. I don't have any immediate experiences because, well, that's not entirely true. I have been reading Wing Feather
Oh yeah,
with my daughters. I've been reading the third book.
cool. Yeah, they're not quite to the third book yet in the show, but yeah, I love their covers. Their covers are so
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, so this one is like a more serious sounding name instead of the Dark Sea of Darkness. This is the Warden and the Wolf King book. It's good.
Yeah. Yeah, I have yet to read them. I read part of the first one, but
Yeah, me too.
so many other things to read. Yeah. And it made me happy that you were checking up on the kids reading. So
Yeah.
I didn't need to do all that stuff. But yeah, so as it comes to media experiences, yeah, I didn't do a lot this week either, but I guess I could look into the three articles I wrote this week. I haven't done my Media Moses Weekly yet, but I can always show the three articles I wrote anyway. So I shared this one, City Hill Arts to make Hollywood movies with a conscience? Question mark. The idea is that this is City Hill Arts is like a company from San Diego. Jonathan Lim is the head of it. He had a little interview here with the Collision. He's a guy making a production company. He made My Penguin Friend, and he's making a faith-based film called In the Beginning, so-called faith-based film. But it looks like he wants to do a lot of stuff that's like culturally not challenging, you know, just kind of like I guess someone people would call it wholesome, good content with nothing good or bad in it, just kind of like good for the whole family. But it's something good when it's not really good, you know. So I that's the question that I posed in that article because I think today we need people who are willing to make hard decisions, not just people who are going to make kind of milk toast, whitewashed material that doesn't really challenge anybody. This is the other article I wrote about Nightbirde legacy honored in Angels, the King of Kings music video and trailer. Her legacy, if you've never heard of Nightbirde, I'll read some of this article. Nightbirde, a musical artist that suffered through cancer, finally reaching the end of her road here on Earth, successfully challenged, blessed, unburdened so many people of the fears they may have had with suffering and death. She blessed numerous children of God who find hope in Christ through her legacy of living life to the fullest, no matter what impossible odds you face. Her music, her foundation, and those who carry the candle of her memory have graced the latest King of Kings live stream with her presence, and Angel Studios has championed her work through this music and through the upcoming King of Kings film, based upon Jesus, whom Nightbirde recognizes as Lord. Yes, it's coming April 11th. Until then, enjoy this music, I say. So I have one of her songs here, which is kind of a nice introductory song to her work called The Story I'll Tell. But I put here the most famous thing she's known for, which is getting the golden buzzer at America's Got Talent with Simon Cowell. So this is mostly what made her known, and she was actually suffering through cancer at this very moment,
Wow.
and performed "It's Okay," and actually the crowd, told all the people that she was suffering through cancer. They said she had a 2% chance.
Wow.
And this is my favorite song of hers, "Fly." Afterwards, she did not survive. but an African choir took the prize at America's Got Talent in her stead, singing It's Okay in her honor.
Mm.
What a story.
Wow.
Her story is quite compelling, and I think it can help many to deal with what they're suffering through. I actually don't know what it has to do with the story of the King of Kings, but except for the fact that her song is in the King of Kings trailer. So I think we should play that because it is a pretty good trailer. It's got a statement here about her life if you want to read it. It kind of tells what she went through in her story. And of course, you can find her Nightbirde on Spotify. We can play this trailer. Excuse me for
That's our youngest right there.
He's not. He's all going to do this.
Wow, it looks great.
I'm not interested. This story is about the king of kings. That's her song.
Hmm.
How do we help Jesus along the way? I don't just turn the people against him. Mhm.
Wow. That looks great. I haven't seen that trailer before.
Yeah, I mean, I her song is incredible. And I wish that more of the song was in there, but it really did punctuate certain moments. Maybe I should play at least one of her songs here. So I guess I will play that song. So this is her song Fly. That was actually in the trailer just now.
I can't believe that this is really happening to me.
Stop right there. Don't you take another minute. I don't care. You wasted all your words on nothing. I am done with you and all your cynicism. Suffocating realism. Trying to keep me tied to the ground. I'm not in the dark, but I'm not sure if I've gone far enough. From the voices that tell me that I'm not made for love. You're the only one who knows that I'm still curious. If you're with me, then I know that I will. I will fly. I will fly. I will
Wow. We're probably gonna get copyright struck.
I'm
It's
climbing, I'm climbing,
it's we haven't said anything, so
up and up.
well, there's a reason we haven't said anything. It's because her voice is incredible.
Yeah.
We don't want to talk over it. It's quite a story. I should have put the video on this article about her life because somebody did a quick video on not just what we know her from, but kind of like even even like where she went to college and where she was starting to build her music career, and then she stopped, and then she got married, and then she moved out to California because they did find that she had cancer, but then she beat cancer, right? At least so they thought. And she was in the competition, and then it came back, and that's when she died. But like, um, I think it was a good, I don't know, 2, 3 years where she was fighting cancer.
Mm.
I think she even got 3 times. I think I don't know, 2 or 3 times, but like, yeah. So it's quite an interesting story.
Wow.
I shouldn't even say interesting. That doesn't do it justice. It's a really heartbreaking, but you know, God worked through her when what she did mightily.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
also just the story of her getting her name, Nightbirde.
Yeah.
She said she had a dream 3 nights in a row, the same dream, and she would wake up the first 2 nights and hear birds singing,
Mm.
and there was no. She would wake up and then there was no bird. And the third night, she heard the bird and she woke up and there's a whole flock of birds in her tree outside. And it's like 3 in the morning.
Yeah.
And she described it like God telling her the birds saw the sunrise, but it wasn't there.
Mm.
And so they were anticipating the sunrise coming. They knew it was coming. And I don't know, that makes me think that she saw the sunrise of the next life before it
Mm.
came. And
Yeah.
maybe a little prematurely it came, right? And
Yeah.
she was ready prematurely for it to come. So she sang.
Yeah.
That's quite just, I don't know. God does these things for us sometimes, helps
Yeah.
us to see something profound that we can't quite fit it together at first. We can't quite put it together at first. But then as we live life, we see what it means. And it has to do with God working through us, God working in us, trying to teach us something. This is what it is for God working through Christian artists.
Yeah.
You know, these things become profound things, profound experiences. And when you put that into your art, beautiful things happen. Beautiful things happen. We're going to be talking about that tonight. So, but we're going to be talking about it on the flip side of the coin. What happens when we don't believe? What happens when we don't believe that God can do these great things through us, right? There's a article someone wrote, an article about Clifton Duncan, and his article he wrote. He writes on Substack. Clifton Duncan is a conservative. He's kind of an ascendant conservative artist. He's a theater actor. He's highly respected. He writes, he produces, he mostly acts, and he's acted in films as well, but mostly he does theater. And he's working on a project now with about Thomas Sowell. And so he's going to be playing the part of Thomas Sowell, who's a famous, brilliant conservative thinker. So let me share his article. Well, actually, I want to share you my article about his article. I know we're on the internet, right? So it's so meta. We have to do articles about articles.
I like it.
There's Clifton. And oh, look, mine is For subscribers only. Looks like I have to subscribe.
You subscribed?
Let me get my other one out. Here we go. Here we are at Media Moses. Clifton Duncan doubts that MAGA will understand how to make art great again. So he does have an article, and let's see, I think it's here. Here it is. Here's his article. Is on Substack. It's cliftonduncan.substack.com on MAGA's Golden Age in Art. A renaissance in American art and culture is sorely needed. It's unlikely to come from the right, it says. So he's saying there won't be a golden age. So let's go back to my article, which is about this article. Prominent conservative writer, producer, podcaster, theater actor Clifton Duncan has gained much respect in the last few years for his ascendancy to the front lines of conservative culture wars. But still, many political actors do not get the nuance in the arts, and so do not understand most of what Clifton says. They think they can just command the culture to do as told. They think this is what political power is about. They are wrong, but there's more to it than that. So there's a lot of nuance here. A lot of people are not going to understand this because we're not culture builders. They're not artists, etc. But that's okay. Read it anyway. let's read it anyway. Culture is not Hollywood or art or theater or social media. Culture is a conversation and a mediation between them all. Now, again, this is me speaking. This is my theory of culture. Okay. So what you're hearing now is my theory of culture and so like whenever someone talks about something like culture building or things like this, I'm putting my 2 cents in and letting them know why I have a slightly different opinion than they do, maybe a very different opinion. But this comes from my own worldview as a Christian artist. And I think more people need to understand that culture is a conversation. Culture is a conversation and a mediation between them all. And being the result of that conversation, arbitrary power has no stake in it. None. It can only affirm or deny what has been decided in the conversation. But it actually can act as a participant in that conversation as well, meaning that if it seeks to do so, it must follow the proper rules of good conversation. If not, it will be perceived as an uncultured brute, unable to influence even the tiniest children on how good a grasp they have of culture. The answer is, once again, none. So culture does as it pleases. Forcing people to follow your culture is not really a culture, right?
Yeah.
So, and then I write, but we will talk about when children do as they please and what comes of such later. For now, let's discuss how we and how Clifton can convince conservatives that they've got this whole thing wrong on the matter of culture. Sadly, we both know if these new conservatives were willing to listen and learn about culture, they could master it in short order. Frankly, it's not that difficult. But what does Clifton think? On State of the Arts, which is on Substack, Clifton Duncan presents us with a far more complicated and dire situation, which, if true, the current political order will entirely fail in trying to make Hollywood great again, or make art great again, and progressives will continue in their domination of it. So there's his article link. And then I do a breakthrough of what he says, and then I respond to it here. So here's what he says. One, he starts out sharing Trump's tweet about the Kennedy Center leadership change. And he clarifies that this enraged many leftists, leading many of them to stop working for the center. So here's my response to that. Clifton calls this counterproductive, but I don't think so. In fact, I think that's the point of the leadership change at the Kennedy Center. I think Duncan may believe that the objective of this change is to force progressives to work for new conservative projects, but that's not true. it's to cause a shakeup within the ranks, which it did. Two, Clifton presents an ideological challenge to the method of using the Kennedy Center, or NEA, shifts to the right wing's advantage as foolhardy, meaning, as I stated above, culture works as a conversation, not as an arbitrary enforcement of rules, and therefore this attempt will likely have next to no impact on the real culture, because force applied is not a conversation. So some of that's just stated in my words, because he doesn't see it as a conversation. I do. And as a result, I don't think his argument is as elegantly put as I put it. But he does reason very well about it. And you can certainly reason about why culture is a conversation and why trying to force a culture doesn't work. There's plenty of data on this. So here's my response to that. He's not wrong about this in the sense of culture being a conversation. But if you do research on state intervention of the arts, what you'll find is that a nominal shift does occur, but it does not necessarily have a lasting effect or lasting power. Sometimes it does, however. As I laid out earlier, the state must participate in the conversation by being fair and offering options, rather. Be fair and offer options, because the state that participates has every right to act like a parent in the conversation when the other participants are acting like children. Offer options, be fair but firm. Take Charlemagne's interjection into economics, the arts, the church, and in culture. Do you remember this, honey, when we were watching Francis Schaeffer's How Do We Then Now Live?
Yeah.
We had just watched the Middle Ages one, didn't we?
Mm-hmm.
And it talks about Charlemagne, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So Charlemagne is a great example of how culture can be shifted by a good leader.
Yeah.
He just has to shift it in the correct way, right? He has
Right.
to do what I describe as participating in the conversation.
Yeah.
So that means if a leader provides choices, right, provides options, but is fair and firm, then they act as a parent to their subjects, right? So then their subjects have a choice to make, but they realize that because of the fairness of this leader, they should probably choose the right thing. Take Charlemagne's interjection into economics, arts, church, and culture, for example. A Carolingian style of architecture and art resulted, which came from his unifying efforts to bring peace and order there. After giving the church favors and privileges, just as he did with counts and landholders, a unifying effect occurred. Cultural unity also led to a standardization of script styles by the church, which in turn led to advancement of the gospel and literacy, not to mention its effect on peaceful living, leading to economic rewards, which were now able to be sustained through standardized coinage. This had an enormous effect culturally, even taking us from what they called the Dark Ages into the Middle Ages. These cultural efforts for unification and power certainly were not nothing. Of course, many people aren't going to know about Charlemagne. They're not going to know how this leader brought about cultural changes. I'm not saying all these were good, because I say here, war and even persecution happened during this time for those who would not cooperate. This is true. But this was the opposite of apathy. And it was the opposite of culturally ineffective leadership, which is my whole point. My point is not that all of these leaders are always going to be perfect and never make mistakes and never be cruel or whatever, but that they might have culturally effective leadership, right? So, and that doesn't come from them just forcing their way around. It comes from them understanding the culture and, like I say, providing options, but being fair but firm. And here's another example I give. As a more recent example, the Hays Code was instituted in Hollywood to prevent the continued cultural vandalization of our most forward-looking art form in the 1900s, which is the cinema. Many who like academic revisionist versions of Hollywood say that this did nothing but harm our culture, comparing it to the blacklist later. But they're absolutely incorrect, right? These are just people who didn't want to be told what to do. You can look this up. I will give an easy example. The Hays Code has such an enormous effect on Hollywood that within 10 years, everyone was arguing about whether Clark Gable's Wilkes character would say damn in Gone with the Wind, while 10 years earlier, it was about whether sex scenes would be happening wholesale in cinemas or not. So the shift for the public was indeed real. And while Hollywood complained the entire time, wishing they could make more skin flicks, the quality of their art continued to improve due to the Hays Code, which led to the current rating system we now have. So that was not nothing. And it did have an impact. Here I share actually my episode in the past, my podcast episode 50, where I talk about can Trump reform Hollywood? I talk about the Hays Code and all this stuff in that. So if you want to check that out, you can learn more about that. I also talk about Trump's ambassadors there, which that's why I made that episode, because it was talking about Trump's ambassadors and stuff. And can they reform Hollywood? I think most people would probably have Clifton's opinion that this is going to do nothing, because it's not like having a conversation with Hollywood, right? It's true, but at the same time, what did Trump do? He hired 3 ambassadors, not hired, but he basically got these 3 ambassadors, Mel Gibson, John Voight, and Stallone, and they're supposed to, have an impact in Hollywood. Hopefully they will. But that episode 50 right here, is about whether or not they can do that and how they could. But the fact is that they will probably fail if they don't learn from history. Let's move on to point 3. Duncan talks about Megyn Kelly saying that she doesn't care. He doesn't think it helps to be so harsh to leftists. He calls this response emblematic of the apathy he sees on the right towards culture. Well, my response is he's not wrong that the right is incredibly apathetic about culture, shamefully so. But Kelly's statements was not a statement of apathy, but of callousness. It was a statement that validates my point that the right actually achieved what it desired through the power shift, which is the left leaving the front lines of battle, kind of throwing down their toys and storming out. That's actually a victory. This way, our artists can pick up these open positions. Kelly is right to tell them to go away. In addition, we actually are happy if they do go away and stop corrupting culture. Yeah, don't feel bad for them if they shut down their whole production. I know it might mean temporarily less jobs for some people, but that's the opportunity to pick up those jobs and do something more conservative. That's the opportunity actually to do that. So you have to take that opportunity. Number 4, Clifton furthers his point that this need in society is very current and even urgent, and that the right needs to focus on it more. He points to the great many thinkers and artists who have asked so many on the right so many times to engage and create because we all need it. He reasons that the right is unable to do this because it is not suited to cultural thought. And he's right about that. By the way, he's got a good many thinkers in that list of his. People like Camille Paglia, Brandon Sanderson, all kinds of other people who are engaging in culture building and trying to convince the right wing, conservatives, Christians, etc., to engage in culture building, and kind of frustratedly wondering why they're not doing more. Obviously, I can tell you why that's true, but admittedly, sometimes it frustrates me as well. So
Sometimes.
on the daily, So here's my response. Yes, I have made the same point. The right is left-brained, so to speak. The left is right-brained, so to speak. The proof of such cultural superiority on the left is evident in what the left has built over the last 100 years, where the right has reached the point of asking silly questions like, what does art even do? Does it build anything? Like, this is literally a question that he puts in his article that somebody asked him on the right, and he understands. Here's my response to this kind of question, to which I say, my sweet summer child, art only builds your own dreams at night, nothing major. It only severs you from your reality and forges your every road to success. No big deal. Yeah, that's all it does. These are enormous issues on the right, admittedly so. Number 5, this is kind of his final point, but it's kind of long. I have a long answer to this one because it's about what conservatives can actually do. So that's exciting. He finally gets to what conservatives can do. Populists cannot do this, in my view. So it has to be real conservatives. This is the stuff I really love. We can all see that there's an issue, but the only real question is, what do we do and why? Everything else is either simple observations or complaining. It's pointless grandstanding without action. So Clifton gives us 6 things for the right to do. That is, if it actually seeks to have influence and make change in the culture. So I'll go through all those 6 things. Many of them are kind of commonsensical, but some of them are very useful and interesting. Firstly, he knows that the right understands market competition, so use it. Be heterodox and daring, because these are actually things the left likes. That attitude can go a long way to making change in media and culture. And in this case, being different can give you an advantage in the arts, for one. I mean, I'd say like channel the punks from the 80s, 70s and 80s. Channel those dudes. Because those were guys who were heterodox, they were in your face, they had attitude, right? And a lot of people don't even know, but the original punks were right wing, so not left wing. That wasn't always a good thing, but sometimes it was. Secondly, use strong incentive structures to create bigger institutions. Forming a market advantage can actually grow your wallet and secure your place in a competitive market. These incentives make strong institutions, and this can build cultural influence for years to come. So understanding incentive structures, like what can incentivize people to work in culture? Well, you got to pay them, right? You got to like build up local communities that support local artists, right? There's a whole lots of stuff you can do, actually. You can even just go on Kickstarter and find conservative artists building stuff, support them on there. There's lots of stuff you can do. I mean, my whole Medium Moses project is basically that. That's like what I'm doing, supporting a community. So thirdly, he says, in the meantime, before these strong institutions form, your scrappy local independent artists will need to be located and supported. Learning who these are and throwing them any kind of support instead of the old Netflix and chill every night will go a long way to helping build communities and then institutions later. This is kind of like the second one, right? Incentive structures, but it's not just about building institutions. It's about supporting strong, independent kind of artists, right? Local people, building a local community, that's going to really help people. So later on, they can become major institutions. Fourth, education that supports the arts and culture are going to be necessary. It isn't just about seizing the liberal institutions from leftists. It's also about deciding what good ideas will substitute for these corrupted ones. Change the book reading requirements to more conservative work. Change which school you send your kids to. Change a child's curriculum to the arts instead of STEM, if that's actually what your kid loves and is good at. Otherwise, stay with STEM. STEM will actually make you money. That's my point.
Mhm.
But the culture is suffering. So this is pretty important right now. Fifth, make arts masculine again. Yes, that makes the acronym MAMA. Make arts masculine again. The feminization of our culture has led to so many aspects of our society being corrupted. It isn't even funny. Small issues are made into a mountain, and people that ought not escape criminal prosecution get to go free. Our culture has much to say about this injustice in society, but instead of doing that, we get make-believe boss babes beating up men 3 times their size and deep discussions over coffee in the boutique. Lastly, Duncan astutely points out that the right gives great respect to the trades, as they should, yet doesn't know that the arts is essentially a craft and a trade. It isn't meant to be seen as a godlike holy person that gets cameras trained on them daily and does interviews about what they ate for lunch. Nobody should care about that, yet they do. Instead, they should care about the craft of writing or the craft of filmmaking or the craft of acting, because that's what it is, a skill that you develop over time. Nobody on the right would fail to give respect to a great finishing carpenter who made their house strong and beautiful, and yet they fail to give the same respect to a filmmaker or writer who crafts their work in a similar way, with discipline and care. It makes zero sense. I have to agree with all this. Competition, incentives, independence, education, masculinization, and respect, which kind of respect and masculinization go together quite well. These are all character qualities that the right says they possess. Do they? Do they really? Or have they already been so corrupted by the left wing that all their solutions are like left wing, light, watered down beer? As a conservative myself, I must admit that I have felt minimized in my work by people who call themselves right wing.
Human beings have a need for art and culture. Like we're consuming art and culture. So it's a need that we have in the world that people can provide.
And when you were only getting food from one source, you really have a lot of trust in that source.
Hmm.
You're literally eating junk food.
Yeah, absolutely. You need edifying culture, uplifting culture,
Yeah.
nourishing culture.
Mm-hmm. And I do go into that some down here, by the way. But what I do before I go into that is I say, if we feel so secure in our beliefs already that we have culture figured out, but we can't answer these questions securely, boy, there's a problem. So we ought to be asking ourselves these questions. Question one, if we fail to offer competitive structures, how do we know our ideas are any better than others? That's about competition, right? If we fail to provide incentives, why would we ever blame anyone for leaving and following another path? If we fail to support independent creators, why are we surprised when we get a huge corporate monoculture? If we fail to educate properly, why are we surprised when the quality of our art is bad due to ignorance? If we fail to offer masculine art, why are we surprised when an entire segment of the population falls between the cracks and fails to be the builders, justice keepers, and fathers that a nation and in reform needs so badly? Why are we surprised? If we fail to respect, it's no wonder that the men and the craftsmen fall off the bandwagon knowing they are unneeded and unwanted. That's what respect is for, letting people know they're needed and wanted, right? It's no wonder indeed. We only have ourselves to blame. So I've given him this credit, but the truth is there are a few problems with this article. Firstly, the idea that these actions that Trump has taken, for example, will not produce the reforms that we need. Sure, it is only a beginning point. This beginning point is like a beachhead being established. The fighting must occur after this. And this is what hasn't really occurred yet. True cultural work can still occur. Of course, when I say fighting, what I mean is people engaging on the level of culture with each other. So more conservative culture coming into the fray. We need to uncover this conservative culture, spread it around, talk about it, help it to engage with society. As we do that, it starts to affect the culture, right? But if we do not do that, it's not engaging with society. So that's a very important aspect that has to happen. That's the fighting I'm talking about. I know that Clifton Duncan is working on a play. This is the kind of thing many conservatives are working on. And yes, we need more of it. But an NEA grant, for example, or a Kennedy Center show can make that work more effectual. So I'm saying that Trump doing that can make that work more effectual. That's my point. Secondly, Duncan approaches this issue as a social libertarian. I have a lot to say about this here. And this is about the fact that he says about kind of like parsing the difference between how a person can get involved with, how a conservative can get involved with social issues, and how a conservative should not do that. Let me also say that I myself used to be a social libertarian. And it did not do much to help improve society. It was a lot about how we have rights. And yes, we do. But we have no right to do as we wish. And if we harm others or even ourselves, this presents a harm to the whole of society. Instead, we learn to recognize that if you are a moral person, you have a foundation for that morality, which will end up in your laws. No matter what kind of religion or what kind of society, your own sense of morality decides what kinds of laws you write, you vote for, and you enforce. So this is unavoidable. Your morality goes into what laws you vote for. Your morality goes into what laws you write, and it goes into what laws you enforce. After all, if you don't believe in it, why make it a law at all? Of course, you should believe in it. And where do you get that belief? From your moral system of life, your worldview, your religion, your belief system, right? This is just unavoidable. The truth is, social libertarianism comes from a lack of moral conviction, which is why they allow people to do whatever due to lacking knowledge or a moral vantage point. This sort of ambiguous passivity about morality and good laws doesn't make your society better, but worse. There's a reason fentanyl hits the streets, right? Just as permissiveness in a home doesn't benefit your child's life or give them a strong place from which to view life, so they eventually become a victim of their own ignorance. They end up leaving home and doing what others will teach them to do, but only because you failed to give them stronger morals. I remember realizing that America was for a responsible moral people, and that when parents refuse to teach their children, it leads us to the country we have now, one full of people who are entirely unfit to live in a constitutional republic as our own. They end up tearing down the foundations of such a beautiful system of checks, balances, and constitutional values that were built on very real Christian moral values. Then I realized we made it this way through permissiveness and bad education, and that if people refuse to act responsibly as adults and morally as Christians, then our country would be lost. People acting like children, asking for more privileges and rights to do harm to their neighbor and themselves is not a healthy society, right? So we're defining what a healthy society looks like. I was reminded then that this is why criminals are sent to prison, because they are no better than children who must be sent to their rooms. They must learn to benefit. They must learn the benefit of taking responsibility and the benefit of living a good life as a moral human being who can love their neighbor. This is what the law does. It sends immoral lawbreakers to prison, either to reform or to separate them from those who will be good citizens, because laws are also there to protect people's rights, secure the good work of those who do good in society. This makes society healthy. And so we do need to educate and we do need to reward those who do good. Additionally, in order for all these gains to make a difference, we will need our cultural institutions to champion new values in our art, which are two things: the old values that made our country great, independent religious institutions like the ones that founded our country, and the common values that come from these, right? So there's things we can agree on among our different independent religious institutions. That's essentially what conservatism is, right? Sure, some may call that goal ecumenism or syncretism, but I know the difference. Syncretism is the mixing of two religions in ways that make each one symbolic and therefore toothless and useless. Ecumenism comes from a desire to worship together with other Christians of other stripes without emphasizing difference. It was not a bad idea first, but it was executed poorly, and eventually common statements of belief and of behavior ended up doing what syncretism does eventually, watering down stuff. No, the kind of culture making I talk about must be an authentic desire to make what I call cultural tools, to engage in conversation morally, intelligently, using abstractions, sentiments, ideas, and thinking with strong moral themes that utilizes the majority conservative base of thought as a foundation. It often relies upon moral sentiments that are universal instead of super controversial, while any controversy ends up couched in literary devices or cinematic language. So mostly I'm describing art here, or cultural tool making, I call it, not the filtering aspect of culture building as much. But that's also very important. This is the kind of art that conservatives can make. So it champions all six maxims that Clifton Duncan mentioned: good competition, good incentives, valuing independence, educating right, using manly heroes, and giving these heroes respect they deserve. But what you end up with when you make good art like this is something more like a mythology or mythopoeia than a blatant religious propaganda, which is what we get a lot of today, right? I've spoken on this many times, and both C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien does as well. But the truth is, many of us who are not artists simply do not understand these concepts. And all they know is the effects of people using these concepts correctly, meaning they like it when they see it, but they don't know why. So they can speculate, right? Often, however, it is literally because it is successfully mythopoeic. That's why it's successful. These ideas are foundational to our new film company as well, Trithia. So I say here also, I refer people to my podcast. Much can be said on this. I have likely about 60 hours of content talking about this topic at this point. So, and this is a good place to start, by the way. This one right here, this is also from Cultural Warfare right here. And Trump Reform Hollywood. I talk about some other things too, like Narnia and stuff. But so what are your thoughts, Rebecca? What do you think? I went
Great
through
art.
a lot, and I know I went through a lot.
In a sense, I think some of the most interesting stories to me tend to be conservative. The fairy tales and the Bible stories. I'm not saying that
Mhm.
those stories themselves are conservative, but they tend to be,
They are.
yeah, they tend to be
They're
I-
family value centric. Yeah.
yeah, identified with conservative minded people. So to me, it only makes sense that conservatives would be right
Mhm.
brained, brained.
Yeah, conservatives actually are
Right.
left-brained because they're more like systematic thinkers, mathematics, you know, stuff like that. It's the artists who tend to be right-brained and creative thinkers. But I know that's not what you were saying. Sorry. No, you're right. Actually, I should do a whole study on how fairy tales are entirely conservative, almost entirely conservative
Yeah.
in their nature. I mean, what are some of the most famous fairy tales you can think of? Pick any. Doesn't matter.
Yeah, if you think about like the traditional ones that everybody knows, Snow
Red
White, and
Riding Hood, Little
um
Red Riding Hood.
yeah, when you think about those, they follow a cultural norm that you're kind of expecting to see within the story of what the character does, what the character's sort of expected to do, and the understanding all around them.
It's literally cultural norms to protect children from their own silly curiosity. Like
Yeah.
almost always. I mean, Hansel and Gretel. I mean, the Piper thing, the Pied Piper or whatever. Um, like
Red Riding Hood.
Red Riding Hood. I mean, even the silly egg that falls and cracks. I said, be careful, kids. Like, don't be silly like the
Billy, Mr. Eggman.
Mr. Eggman, whatever his name was. Like
Humpty Dumpty. Yeah, that's a good one.
our little boy could use that story. That's a kid will fall off his chair. Like literally, like he does that almost daily. It's really kind of hilarious. Um, but like Red Riding Hood is just a great example of this because first of all, it teaches you that even people in your own family can be weirdos. You know, and also the red hood, right, is almost like it's a bit garish. It's like warning kids to not be so garish, right? But also remember that even your own granny might try to eat you. Like, you know what I mean? Like, be careful, cautious, conservative. Like understand that weird things like this happen, and stay safe from people. Because the idea is that this wolf is supposed to look like her granny to her. Otherwise, she wouldn't get close to it, right? So the idea is that you have to be, it's almost like it's not almost another version of a Hansel and Gretel, right? Except Red Riding Hood is in her own circle of friends. She just hasn't left home. She's not doing anything that weird except wearing a garish costume. The garish costume is, right, the going out and being a little bit silly, maybe. But Hansel and Gretel, like they're exploring, they go out, and what happens? Why did they get eaten by this witch? Well, they're too curious. They're going out, they're like, and they're also led by their stomach, right? And so the witch feeds them, and this is how she eats them, right? And so, like, if you're not careful, you're led by your stomach and your curiosity everywhere you go, you could get eaten by a witch. I mean, this is all conservative, like be careful, kids. Don't go around those weirdos. Don't go
Yeah.
hanging out in gingerbread houses in the middle of the woods. That's just weird. Get out of there.
Yeah.
Right? So fairy tales are incredibly conservative, and it cares about the weakest and youngest of us, right? And it's trying to give them some sense, right? Like be careful of these kinds of people, be careful of these situations, be careful of those situations, right? And the same kind of kids who are a bit silly are the ones who won't listen to you when you tell them straight up, don't do that. You need to tell them a dumb little story for them to listen. Like, I got a story for you, kiddo. Oh, I would like to hear a story. I don't want to be told what to do, but I'll listen to your story because that's more interesting.
Mm.
That's just how human beings are. So
Yeah.
this is how you actually protect kids. It's how you protect society. Is you
Yeah.
make these silly, dumb little stories that are not dumb. They're very helpful, right? They're very instructive to a little kid who just doesn't know what they're doing. They're led around by their emotions in their stomach and their curiosity. They're not thinking and being smart. They don't know that witches that will eat you exist,
Yeah.
right? And so you have to kind of like, I'm not saying you want them to live by fear, but you're making them understand that evil does exist in the world. It's not just bad people, it's evil. A
Yeah.
wolf that dresses up as a grandma is not a normal wolf. It's not how wolves work. I don't know if you knew this. Wolves don't typically dress up like grandmas. No, this is not some normal, typical wolf. No, this is like some kind of other thing, right? This is like a person that acts like a wolf, right? This is like the witch that eats kids. It's almost the same kind of story, right? So, and the Three Little Pigs, same kind of thing. Don't think you can just build a house or build your life and it's just going to stand up to whatever weather that comes from weird wolves going around blowing on houses.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, don't think it's just going to survive all that. Build a good house,
Yeah.
you know? And you're going to also, there might be a learning process, right? You build a little bit better house, but that might not be good enough. You might need to build even better. This is going to take even longer. So, like, it's that kind of patience. This story is teaching kids you might have to have a little more patience and knowledge and intelligence to actually survive, right? So, it's instilling these kinds of values in kids right away. They could be like 4 years old and they're already being given some deep wisdom that adults today don't even know.
Yeah.
Adults today are just like, we'll just buy whatever house. They've never heard the story, you know? That would be great for us to do sometime is just kind of analyze some of these fairy tales and talk about how conservative they are, but how useful they are to society.
Yeah.
You know, of course,
And
we talk about George MacDonald sometimes.
I would even say too that I think some of the most popular films, I think what am I trying to say? Like the most popular style of film tends to be the lone wolf character
Mhm.
who, where do we even get this character, this male character who winds up um sacrificing his life, or maybe not sacrificing his life, but risking his life to save others.
Yeah.
Um, this is not a common character in other cultures. Like we don't see these kinds of films in other cultures. Like we see this mostly in the West,
Hmm.
because this is like our Christ figure. This is
Right.
the character that comes in and saves the day. Like this
Yeah.
is our favorite type of movie. Um, and I would say that's probably conservative.
Well, it is. And And I would dare to say too, it's not even just about Christ, although Christ does give us this concept. Um, but and by the way, the Epic of Gilgamesh, which some people will say, no, the Epic of Gilgamesh came before Christ and all this stuff. Yes, but do you know that the Epic of Gilgamesh was influenced by the Old Testament? And the Old Testament actually spoke of Christ before Christ came.
Mm.
Mic drop. So, and the Epic of Gilgamesh doesn't do it very well either, by the way. He's kind of silly. He's so like chest beating. He's like, I'm the greatest person ever. Not very smart. Okay, anyway, back to the lone wolf, right? It's not just Christ, though. What it also is the individualism that comes from the West, right? The West is more individualistic than the East. The West tends, why is this? Because of individual rights, right? What we stand up for is the weirdo who stands out in a crowd. And so people who are a little too like purist and they want to make sure their society is perfect, right? Some people might call conservatives that way, by the way. They tend to do things like they'll stone the person that they think is different. And so what God does is he says, no, this person is acceptable to me. And a good example of that obviously is the woman caught in adultery. The story of the woman caught in adultery in the Bible is is a situation where it's basically one woman against a whole crowd of guys who want to stone her to death. I don't see it as a masculine feminine dynamic here. I see it as, although there is some of that in there for sure, but I see it as a Jesus defending the helpless, even a helpless sinner who acknowledges their sin and wants to turn from it. He defends those people. And what he says is he turns the tables over and says, what about you guys? Are you holy and good and pure? Right? And so what they were relying on as the impetus for stoning this person wasn't what it was supposed to be about, which was about holiness versus uncleanliness. This is what the Jewish law is about. What they were using was social unacceptability, right? We're the acceptable ones. And because we're in this group, this mob, we feel justified to do this. And Jesus was saying, listen, if you take the holiness factor out of it, you actually have no cause to do this because that's what the law is about. And if you're not more holy than this person, what are you even doing here? Right? So Jesus was reminding them what the law was really supposed to be about. It wasn't supposed to be about having the us and the them factor and having the clean and the unclean in a way that was unjustly used, right? That was being turned on its head, and she wasn't any more unclean than they were. So that was their real problem, right? So, and also Jesus knows the heart. So he's bringing us into a place now with Christianity, which kind of transcends Judaism. Christianity basically is a place where it's about your relationship with Christ. It's not about your relationship with this institution, which can be very wrong about your heart. Right? This institution can look at your flesh and say, oh, he's been circumcised in the flesh, so he's good. But what was circumcision supposed to be about? It was supposed to be about a circumcised heart from the beginning. And Christianity is kind of a way of reminding the Jewish system that it's not good enough by itself without Christ. And it doesn't work without Christ. Why? Because only Christ is holy. Only he can be the perfect sacrifice. And all of these sacrifices done in the temple are not good enough to keep you clean. So, and the temple sacrifice isn't happening. So what about all these Jews now? Does God see all their sin? Right? Without Christ, they're unclean. He's the final sacrifice once and for all. So, and he paid the price for the thief on the cross who didn't get baptized, and for that woman who was a prostitute or caught in adultery, even though she didn't follow all the religious system's rules for validating that. It was about her relationship with Christ right then and there. So that's what it's about. It's about him.
Yep.
He's instituting over all these legal systems now. And so he's in charge of all of it. He can just decide, nope, I see that woman's heart. And um, so, like, you're right that, by the way, that fairy tales and Bible stories are often very connected. And there's a lot of beauty there. Was there another point you were going to make, though?
No, I was just talking about the influence of the lone wolf character. There's
That's right.
other cultures where their movies can be more dualistic, and their characters can be more like morally ambiguous. But I feel like in the West, we love a male character who has strong values. Um, and I mean, sometimes those strong values are different from our own, but
Sure.
but he's a character who has a strong sense of right and wrong. That's what I'm trying to say.
He challenges
He,
people too.
yeah, he might be an anti-hero or he might be an underdog or something, but he has a strong sense of right and wrong um and makes a change
Yeah.
in his environment and his surroundings. And so um it's like we've always wanted conservative these conservative stories. This is, I think, what has always appealed to us as humans because
Heroes. Yeah.
we're searching for the hero, the one hero. So we
Mhm.
like that storyline. Um, so I'm a believer in that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. Like, and people do love, their masculine lone dog heroes who, it's kind of like the Western, right? It's like the samurai flick too. Like Kurosawa took that Western to the East. It's true. So it's not typical of the East to see those things. Um, and but then you'll also have like the action hero
Hmm.
person who's has spent an inordinate amount of time on their skills, and
Hmm.
maybe they don't even fit in,
Yeah.
and maybe their skills don't seem very useful to a lot of people, but
Hmm.
at in this unusual situation which the story presents you with, this person is made for that moment. And this kind of presents us with a providential scenario in which one person has a connection with God, essentially, and does unbelievable things.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're the thing is, this isn't just fantastical either, because there have been people through history, people like George Washington. And I don't just say that as an American, but like there is, by the way, there is someone working on a film about this, about how he, after going on a battle in the Revolutionary War, he'd find like a bunch of holes in his jacket, and then and there was like marksmen who later met him and said, "I shot you like so many times, and you did not fall."
Wow.
And this is an expert marksman. He's like,
Yeah.
he knows when he hits the target.
Mm.
By the way, too, these wars, they were not far at long distance, and they were not fought. So you can see people pretty well, and we're talking like 50 yards from someone. I mean, that's a long distance at that
Mm-hmm.
type of stuff. Generally, it's like fought like 20 feet away from somebody. I mean, it's kind of a terrifying prospect when you think about it. Before the time we have now, but very different. But like there's people who have participated in and done these incredible things in history. And these are fascinating characters. And why is that? It's because we do like to see that God is caring for his people. When we
Mm-hmm.
see examples of that, it gives us hope. It gives us faith in God,
Mm-hmm.
greater faith that there's a force outside of humanity, outside of nature, even that's acting on the on the situations of men to bring about a certain outcome. And that's a proof that God exists. Right. And so when there's these, even an action movie where lots of extraordinary things happen, because there's people who, like I mentioned George Washington, there's people in real life who exist now. They're just physically incredibly gifted people. And so when you see them performing, whether it's in a film or whatever, you're kind of blown away. You're like, do these people really exist? And the truth is, many times they actually do exist. It's not all just visual effects. Sometimes these people really exist, and you're kind of blown away by this. I know that as a director, when I've met certain actors, I really am blown away by some of the things that people can do.
Yeah.
And it really just makes me happy to be in that position because I get to see people, I get a bird's eye view of seeing people doing just extraordinary people doing beautiful things. And it really does kind of give you like hope for humanity. It gives you not just humanity, right? Because God is the creator of mankind. It gives you faith in God that he makes just unique people. He makes beautiful people. And he gives us stories. And those stories really can change people. Like we were talking about Nightbirde
Yeah.
earlier. And these kinds of people are just like they're incredible people, you know?
Yeah.
They really can give you lots of hope. Like lately when I'm not feeling good, I actually play one of Nightbirde's songs. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't know if you knew that. Like in the last week, as I've been going through these stories, I just like her stuff is really affecting, you
Cool.
know. And so like these kinds of people really do make a difference in the world.
Yeah.
They really do. Like she has a foundation now called the Nighbirde Foundation that helps women with cancer.
Yeah.
And her surviving, I think brother and sister run it now.
Mm. Wow.
And so I think that they release her, I think they run her social media and they run her foundation. And these, like 2 3 years of her life, and now there's a whole foundation for women with cancer. And don't you think that Nightbirde, this girl, was like, God, I'll do your will,
Mm.
whatever it is, and God gave her cancer,
Mm.
right? And so you're like, why did this happen? I asked God for you to do your will,
Mhm.
and you gave me cancer.
Mm.
But what we're not knowing is, first of all, she's a lot happier now, you know. But second of all, she's blessed so many people in just that few years that she had cancer. Like that's more than any of us could hope for in life. is that we can, like, I've met people who are like, if I could just bless one person,
Mm-hmm.
job well done, right? And think of how many people that girl blessed through her suffering.
Mm-hmm.
So, suffering is not always a bad thing. It really can have a lot of meaning when you're trusting God through it,
Mm-hmm.
right? And when you're seeking for direction from God about why things are happening. You read the book of Job, it's got
Yeah.
a lot of answers in there. And many of those answers are about trust God because he has done so much more than you can even imagine. And he knows what he's doing. And we don't even have a right to question him. We're his children. But that's not the point of it. It's not to say, oh, you don't have a right. The point of it is to say his ways are so much higher than our ways. And his ways are so much more beautiful than our ways and loving than our ways. Our misunderstanding and our lack of understanding, our lack of knowledge can lead to us not liking God and can lead to us doubting God and can lead to us thinking that God doesn't have answers or that his answers are bad. But this is not a safe assumption to make, right? What's a safer assumption to make is that we just don't understand it. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's not a weakness. That's how God made us. He made us to trust him and to need to trust him. So I think you're right that we have this love of these kinds of stories, especially in the West, where we love these kinds of individualistic stories. Um, but this shouldn't say, right? This shouldn't say that that society doesn't matter, the society's standards and rules don't matter. If all of these standards and rules are structured under God's order and have good moral foundation to them, then they're there to protect all of us, right? And so it's when society kind of has a tile loose, as as the back at the North Wind says, he's got a tile loose. Remember that?
Yes, that was great.
That was cute. Um, when society has a tile loose, then we're all kind of like, oh, something's wrong, and we can make bad decisions then, and we can judge these strange individuals harshly, right? And so that's when those individuals have to like do something amazing in a story so they can survive when people come against them. And there's just so many examples of this in society, and it makes great stories as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll have to do more talking about good stories and how to make great stories. But
Yeah.
there's so many great examples of them already, like we mentioned, fairy tales and things like this, and Bible stories. These are just endless. It's endless. It's endless the amount of stories you can get from them. You know.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, we still try. So, and I've got some I'm working on myself, but like Clifton Duncan, he's doing great work. He's trying to advise people that they can do better, that they
Yeah.
should really care about culture. And culture really it has a lot of impact on society. And if we underestimate its impact, oh, to your own detriment, like it's a very foolish thing to be so apathetic, about what makes culture work.
Yeah.
So I wish the best for him. I hope that everybody has gotten something out of this, and I think that we can actually improve the culture, but we
I
just
think
have
so
to
too.
learn more about it. Yeah, we have to learn more about it, and then we also have to trust our good Christian artists, our good conservative artists, with what they're doing, and we need to find ways of supporting them if we can. So if you have a local Christian or conservative artist who's trying to make something that's good for society, support them, you know. So that'll be a good start. All right, guys, check out my article if you want, and check out this Clifton Duncan article on Substack. How about you, Rebecca?
I was going to say, where can people check out this article?
Yes, this article that I have is on MediaMoses.com, and the article by Clifton Duncan is on Substack, cliftonduncan.substack.com, which is on his State of the Arts publication. So,
Nice.
where can people find you, Rebecca?
You can find me on Substack.
Good.
And you can also find me on YouTube and Facebook. Rebecca Loves Jesus.
Yeah, and I'm on YouTube and Facebook also. Well, not Facebook. I was gonna say X. I'm on, I wouldn't go on Facebook, sheesh. No, I'm on YouTube and X and also MediaMoses.com. You can find me on YouTube at Cultural Warfare with Jon Croft. You can find me on X at Jon Croft and at the Media Moses and MediaMoses.com. So have a great weekend and thanks so much. And stand up for the culture. All right, everybody. Goodbye.
That was a good one.
Oh,
Goodbye.
thanks.